Kia ora. Ko Robert Hales Mokuinga. I'm submitting as a personal view here as a member of the public, although I am a chartered chemical and process engineer with some understanding of energy systems and such like. I'm not against any particular energy source. We will continue to need a mix of them, particularly through transition to a lower energy economy. There's likely justification for having our own fossil fuel extraction from an energy security point of view, but we don't currently have the ability to process it. By the time we've found and built the required facilities, then we will still be in the transition to, a lower emission economy? If that's the reason for our exploration, then how it fits into a long-term energy transformation plan should be transparent and well communicated. How much will we need of these fossil fuels and how long for and what for? These are energy sources of the past century and will contribute further towards climate change, which is already costing us dearly. New Zealand's global reputation and brand is partly to do with our high proportion of sustainable energy sources. This has value in terms of how we're seen in the world, and we should enhance, not undermine it, by appearing to have a fossil fuel focus. We should be investing in energy sources of the future, like solar and wind. And if we do this beyond the capacity we currently have and we currently need for ourselves, then given our abundance of water, as was aptly illustrated by the previous submitter, we could use this excess of water to create hydrogen, which is a fuel of the future and which could transform our economy as an export product. And you never know where we might end up in terms of a comparison with Saudi Arabia or whatever else if we could really get behind hydrogen as an export product. That's the end of my representation of my submission. Happy to take questions.
Good, thank you so much. We have some questions. Steve Abel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Robert. I'm disappointed you don't have music, however, the bar has been set. The question I've got for you is, you spoke about the idea of New Zealand as a renewable energy reputational country and one that has an opportunity to develop and be a genuine contributor to the challenge the whole world faces in decarbonising.
Yeah.
What is the risk to that if we sort of have an everything soup, as this government does, of wanting to do oil, gas and coal, to be clear, as well as they say they want to double renewables? But that just sends a message of saying we don't have an energy plan. We're just kind of going to say yes to everything and fast track a bunch of things that are really going against what the planet needs to do in terms of decarbonising.
Well, as I said in what I spoke to, we do need a mix, and we have to recognise that our current industry and probably military, from a defence point of view, do need fossil fuels as a fuel supply, and we've seen the impact of businesses closing because energy costs are too high. So, managing that transition is important. I think there will need to be a mix for a period of time, but I don't feel like it's transparent as to how long it will take to find any oil and gas, how we would then produce facilities to refine it and to use it locally, how that will actually be secure from a global point of view, what companies we would allow to do it if we're talking global security and maintaining supply for our own purposes in times of challenging conflict or whatever else. So I think how we communicate this is important, and going through a process like this very quickly doesn't help with that communication and that sharing of a plan. So you can see what happened in Ukraine and the issues of Russia turning off the gas for Europe and whatever else. There are risks when it comes to instability, and we clearly need a way to manage those. But I'm just not clear on how this fits in with that sort of strategy and plan from what I've seen shared to date.
And just for clarity, do you don't support the resumption of oil and gas exploration? Is that correct?
I'm to be persuaded. I mean, to support it fully, it has to be explained, and so I feel like without a more detailed justification of why it is to do with energy security, rather than just chasing after a fuel source that's of the last century and looking to profit off that. I don't think that's a good reason, and I think by the time you found it, actually the market for it will have declined, and it will be of less value.
All right, so we'll have to leave it there, Robert. Thank you so much for your support.
Out of all the submissions I watched, Robert is actually one of my favorites because he does explain the need for fossil fuels and it playing a key role in transitioning over to green energy and how it's very important for our energy security. But he also highlights hydrogen, which is really exciting because that's a growing market. And I keep batting on about Lake Onslow, but the biggest expense in producing hydrogen is electricity. And Lake Onslow would have stored 5 terawatt hours of electricity. And that would have helped with a lot of issues in regards to hydrogen production. Because green hydrogen is growing in demand compared to grey hydrogen, which is produced using fossil fuels.
Well, what you say actually strikes a point there, Laura, and I think Sam also probably shared the same views on increasing our environmental standards, and there's some very good policies on the green side. And in terms of the key thing, I think is the perceptive bias that we have perhaps created for ourselves, that mining equals to pollution, equals to anti-environment. And I can tell you, if you've been across the ditch in Australia and have you been to one of those mining places in Kalgoorlie, gold or whatever they're mining, my gosh, you would think, my God, this is a state-of-the-art facility because the mining, pathways and shafts are air-conditioned. I mean, it's like, hey, is this better than even our normal homes?
I mean, they also export a lot of their, Australia exports a lot of their mined minerals resources, and that's something that actually came quite interesting about the Paris Agreement, is when it comes to, say, mining, it doesn't actually take into account of exports. It only takes into account. So I think Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Richard Miles or something, I'll breathe the last name wrong, and someone's probably going to put the correct name in the chat. But he actually mentioned the fact that, for the Paris Accord, the exporting part is not actually part of the Paris Agreement. It's exporting those minerals. But the pretense of New Zealand is, we're not drilling it for export, we're drilling it for internal consumption, which then does increase the emissions, whereas if you export them out, if, say, the coal's burnt in China, it's China's emissions, it's not New Zealand's emissions if New Zealand coal was burnt in China. But that's the thing here is, the difference of what is it going to be? In the case of natural gas, it's a bit hard to export it, unless you've got a pipeline. Yeah. And it was mentioned in there how that Russia was exporting gas, and then with the Ukraine invasion, how quickly the gas can be turned off and affect, say, Germany.
That you answered the question. That is why the whole purpose of this mining thing is to have energy independence. Now, I know we have fantastic energy sources, like that good bloke was saying. We do have hydro, we do have wind, we do have even volcanic, the steam from the heat.
Geothermal.
Yeah, geothermal. Sorry, that one. Yeah, and we have so many types of natural resource. We could be exporters of that. I understand. Harness the green side. Now, mining also can be green. Now, you see, you're saying about 15 years of exploration where nothing really is done. But in that 15 years, the money pumped into our country.
I would like to preface that it does depend on what you're mining, though, because there's no point mining for coal if you're not going to pursue green tech. Like mining for copper and lithium is a different issue. I don't have a problem with doing sustainable mining for lithium and copper as long as marine title, customary titles are acknowledged, iwi are acknowledged. I don't have a problem with that partnership there. I don't have a problem with extracting minerals for the purpose of developing green tech. It's about, like you said, it's how we go about it that matters.
It's like the other thing is, do we go back to running steam trains on our train tracks?
Okay, oil and gas. You see, the moment we say mining, what comes into our mind is we can see all the conversation.
We think of coal normally, yes.
Coal. why are we not thinking of mining other minerals like lithium and those that do not use so much? Well, that's not create so much.
They have different uses long term, and in the case of copper, I mean that can keep being recycled and reused time and time and time again. I mean yes, it's not exactly renewable as such, but its use is infinite. That you can melt it down, put it back up, and then you can sit there and do it that way. I mean that's copper.
I would like to preference one point, though. The reason why the focus is on petroleum and coal is because the Crown automatically owns that stuff. Iwi owns the other stuff.
Okay.
So that, yeah. So
Can
knowing what the Crown owns is very important.
Crown and Iwi work together. That's what the trigger.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Get Crown and Iwi work together. Good.
I mean,
I don't know. People might be against that because they'll see it as co-governance. But yes, you are right. Can they work together? But I can picture equally there will be people who go out there to destroy the relationship because they will see iwi. Oh, that's bad because it's simply the word iwi, or co-governance like there was with Free Waters Reform. Not actually see what the underlying foundations work behind that, such as the Waikato River. There is a trust there that's been a co-government arrangement that has been around since the mid-2000s. But no one seems to talk about that one as being bad because it just flies under the radar because it does nothing wrong and it's productive.
So do you think this kind of, I'm going to use the word fear-mongering among the left, not that you all created...
I think all sorts of directions do fear-mongering, Eric.
I'm very scary.
It's actually not, I mean, I understand you all truly sincerely see, oh my God, it's going to be oil and gas and all the smokestacks everywhere. But today it is so advanced that you won't even know a petroleum plant exists next to your home. Really, I mean, they are kind of so processed nowadays. Do you think so? That, I mean, you can have a petroleum plant, well, not literally next to where you're living, but nearby, and you don't have smokestacks everywhere. So I think sometimes the concerns and the fears...
Well, I mean, we had Marsden Point. That used to make petrol, then the private owners shut it down.
And who shut it down?
The private owners.
Private
a lot of people sit there and go with the Labour government, but it was privately owned and has been privately owned for a very long time. And the shareholders chose to sit there and shut it down rather than spending the money to upgrade it.
I know it's because that time the then Labour government created so many bureaucratic rules and regulations.
Yes, but the bureaucratic rules and regulations have been there for a very long time.
Yeah, affected
that's the thing.
And I mean, operations.
Yeah, it was at a point where it needed a replenishment and a rejuvenization in its production. The other thing is the capacity of it was quite narrow for Marsden Point. It was quite narrow. It wasn't it didn't cover the capacity of what New Zealand used. So that was the other thing with Marsden Point was that you couldn't export the products overseas. Well, the only thing they exported out of there was avgas. Yeah. Everything else was pretty much was domestic supply. And I mean, the reason for avgas was exported overseas is a lot of the avgas that came out of Marsden Point was sent over to the islands, ironically, probably to sit there and refuel Air New Zealand and Qantas planes.
Okay. Anyway, it's not economical, isn't it? In a nutshell, they closed Marsden
Point. I mean, that's the thing. Marsden Point, whereas the one that really gets me is the fact that Singapore exports petrol. Because Singapore has a refinery, which is where we get most of our petrol, our diesel is from. A lot of it is from the Singapore refinery.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the Australian refineries are only supplying domestically, which are the ones that are closer to New Zealand. So we end up having to get our petroleum products from Singapore.
Yes. So that's maybe why there was this focus now, this current government on having energy independence. Like, okay, no worries.
Muldoon did the same thing. Muldoon was doing the same thing during the 80s with the Think Big projects. That's the reason why we got all the hydro dams. That's the reason why we had Marsden Point built. And I mean, at the time, it met the needs of New Zealand well and truly and available for export. I mean, but we had a third of the population we have now. And then, you know, the privatisation of the 90s led things to sit there and do it. Was it TY Point was another one of, what do you call it? You know, building jobs in New Zealand. But was it TY Point's always been privately owned. It never was a government asset. It was just the government supplied the electricity.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Muldoon, like 80% of our energy production is from renewable sources. The problem with carbon emissions in New Zealand, a lot of it comes from transport. So if we can decarbonise that and have enough energy to provide that, awesome. You know, we won't be as affected by carbon tariffs that are coming from the EU.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing we watch. We've